Hey there, guys. So yeah, just again, I'm doing an intro as I'm going to be doing for the rest of the episodes for a long time. So yeah, I'm as you could tell from the title of this episode, I'll be talking about the Halloween films, not all of them, and I'm going to explain why at the very beginning of this episode. Yeah, so that'll be and it'll be a brief explanation as to why I'm not covering all like 15 or whatever films. There's too many. Yeah. But so I hope you guys enjoy this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and I am joined for this episode by Aaron for another
Yellow.
episode. And this week we will be talking about Halloween, the original 1978 film, and Halloween 2018, as well as Halloween Kills. I decided to not talk about all the films in the franchise because there's like over 10 of them. There's
A lot of them are like bad.
yeah, and I know that most of them are considered quite weak and yeah, not worth talking about. So yeah, we're just doing the timeline, the recent timeline that was introduced in 2018 when the new Halloween film came out, which is the original 1978 film, the 2018 film, and then Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, which is what this episode is tying into, which comes out this week, in fact, on Thursday, I believe. So that's why we're doing this film for this week's episode. So, yeah, I'd seen the the original Halloween and the 2018 film before this recording. I watched Halloween Kills yesterday, actually. When we were meant to record this. Just a little peek behind the curtain. This recording was delayed as Aaron was not able to find Halloween Kills, and so he has not seen it, so the discussion on that film will be limited.
Yeah, I was a little bit special at first, and I forgot about Halloween Kills. I only was like, oh, Halloween 2018, and then I got reminded. It was like, oh, there were two different things, and I was like, ah, and so I had like a mad, trying to find it, and yeah, let's just say Amazon, totally the best streaming service, totally.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to ruin any future sponsorships with you, so
Well,
Amazon's
I mean,
fine.
I think you're not like one of the main hosts. You
Yeah.
it's I don't know if you don't speak for me. um, but yeah, so yeah, we're gonna not talk about Halloween Kills too much. I'll give my thoughts on it and everything, but I won't go into like spoiler territory as Anne hasn't seen it, and I'd rather not spoil it for someone who hasn't seen the film. But so yeah, we're just gonna start with the original 1978 Halloween film, which is considered a real horror classic, certainly of
Oh,
its time.
definitely, definitely. Like the amount of times you've just seen like Michael Myers
Mm,
in like media in general.
yeah.
Like for instance, like one of my favorite games, Dead by Daylight.
Yeah.
It has the shape in it. It has you can
Yeah.
play as him as a killer.
Yeah.
And so it shows like how much that movie has influenced pop culture and media and the horror
hmm
genre in general.
Yeah, he's one of those figures. He's like become sort of synonymous with horror. He's like with Freddy
Mm.
Krueger and Jason and sort of those sorts of sort of around late 1970s, early to mid 1980s. That's when you started getting a lot of these kinds of slasher films. With
Yeah,
the Nightmare on Elm Street films and Friday the 13th and Halloween. I feel like was like sort of one of the first ones of that sort of
yeah,
slasher
definitely,
genre.
definitely like a gateway of the slasher
Yeah,
genre. Like
because
definitely,
mm,
without that, we wouldn't get some of the slashers we would have today.
yeah, because sort of around this time we were sort of getting slasher films technically, but they weren't really horror films. Like something like Alien, for example, is arguably a slasher film, but it's not really a horror. Like it is a horror film, but it's more horror sci-fi. It's not sort of taking place within a
Yeah,
real world.
not true
Whereas
horror.
true horror, whereas Halloween, it takes place in just sort of like a regular sort of suburban town, and he's just this guy going around in a mask killing people, you know, and they can't stop him. He's just this unstoppable guy who just cannot be killed.
Yeah, talking about that mask, do you know the story behind that mask?
Is that the William? Are you referring
Yeah,
to the
the
William
William
Shatner?
Shatner
Yeah,
mask.
it's like a
Yeah,
mask, William Shatner mask, like turned inside out, right, or something like that.
it's something like that. Yeah, and no. I'm fairly sure they just got rid of all the color from it.
Oh yeah,
I'm fairly sure because they used to have the hair on top and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
just find it really funny, and like for the time, it was still considered like a budget movie.
Yeah, like
Uh,
this wasn't a. If I was to just look at the budget for this film, it was, yeah, it had a budget of, according to Wikipedia. So like, take this with a grain of salt, but I imagine it's relatively accurate. It's around $300,000 to $325,000.
yeah,
So like, this is really a low budget film, and I mean, it paid off because the film made between 60 and $70 million. You know, at the box office. So it really it
it,
made a lot of money. It was, you know, a very successful film, and then launched the franchise
yeah,
as we know it today.
and it shows that like you don't need like heaps of, well, okay, that's still heaps of money, don't get me wrong, but you don't
Yeah,
need like let's say like Avengers level money to make a good
yeah, exactly. You don't need hundreds of millions of
horror movie,
dollars. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think horror is a genre where you could really get away with it being low budget and not needing like a lot of money behind it. Especially, it depends, of course, on what like you're doing. But like if you're just doing like a slasher film, you don't need a lot of money just because of like what you're doing. Like it's just someone in a mask going around stabbing
Yeah.
people. You know, like it's not that expensive. You know, and for example, Friday the 13th came out a couple years later, had a budget of like $500,000, like, you know, again, and it made, you know, nearly 60 million, you know, like it. So it really shows these films are they're very low budget and they're very cheap to make, but they also create really good box office. And you know,
Yeah.
nowadays you sort of, films make a lot more money. I've well certain like sort of big blockbuster type films, and in horror, and certain horror films, you know, make a lot of money, but you didn't really get that kind of thing back in the 70s and stuff. It was more of
Yeah.
a normal, like, you know, because like highest grossing films around that time still only made like like less than $1 billion, like, you know, like they would make money, but it was very rare that it would break, you know, $1 billion. Like it just wouldn't break $1 billion,
Yeah.
but it would break, you know, several hundred million though.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, compared to some modern horror movies, that movie actually, like, when I first watched it, it actually like got me scared. Like,
Hmm.
it put suspense in me.
Yeah, yeah.
When like I find like a lot of horror, like current horror movies,
Yeah.
lack that suspense, that the actual horror. It's all jump scares these days. It's
Yeah.
and like that one, like the score alone, the
Hmm.
iconic score from that movie
Hmm.
alone can just send chills on you, because and it was designed for that, because it was like all done in the same, in like a really high pitched chord. Like a really high pitched key. I forgot the key, which key it is,
Yeah, no,
but it's
it's
a particular
mhm.
key that's meant to like cause fear,
Yeah, it's
and
yeah,
and
no,
it's
it's
supposed to be unsettling and slow and all that. So like,
yeah, it's a very iconic piece of music. Certainly horror music. It's sort of one of those that, like, you know, people know what it is, and I think it's not really used that much. Like it's used, you know, at various points in the film, but it's only when Michael Myers is around, and it's
and
sort of like
usually when he's in a chase.
the chase, yeah, and it's sort of how like the Jaws theme is used whenever the shark's nearby, and so it's sort of it fills you with suspense, and it's sort of like, oh, you need to get ready because Michael Myers is there, something is about to happen, you know, he's gonna do something, and I think
And without that score, I think the movie might have been like a little bit less impactful because like
Hmm.
even now, people who haven't even seen the movie know that score.
Yeah.
So it
Uh,
really has impact
mhm. Yeah,
on like
and the
everyone's psyche.
score was done by the director John Carpenter, who I'm not like overly familiar with his work. Like I'm aware of his films. I've seen The Thing, which John Carpenter directed, which is a really
I
great
love the
film.
thing.
But
Favorite
I
horror
have,
movie.
but it's your favorite. The Thing is your favorite horror movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, fair enough.
just
The Thing is a really great film.
yeah.
And I mean, I love The Thing too. I think The Thing is a genuinely, and I think The Thing is better than this film, but it's
Oh
also
yeah,
very different because that's more sort of
sci-fi
sci-fi
horror
ish, yeah. Whereas this is
and the
just
practical effects.
practical effects, yeah. Which this film is, there's blood. People we see people get stabbed and there's they get covered in blood, but there isn't really that much.
I'll
It
say maybe one scene when I forgot his name, but one of the characters gets pinned to the door by the butcher's
Oh
knife.
yeah, I don't remember his name either. I don't really remember any of the characters' names
Other
because
than
then
Laurie Strode.
Laurie and Doctor Loomis, who is the
Yeah,
and Michael Myers, obviously. But
yeah,
yeah, uh, I think this film. I mean, to sort of be sort of flat out, I like the film, but I will say I don't think it's like amazing in a way that I know certain other people do. It to me feels like it's a film that it's I mean I don't know if dated is the word I want to use, but it feels like it was made a long time ago. Like
oh yeah.
it's sort of got sort of the way it's sort of sensibilities and sort of elements that I'm like. I mean, beyond the context of my knowledge of like, I know it came out in the late 1970s, but it definitely feels like
Like it
that.
was 70s, yeah.
Yeah,
Like it's got that feel. Like
sort of one thing I pulled out that sort of makes me think like, oh, this was made a while ago is the opening scene, which I think the opening scene is a really nice introduction to it all. I think it's very like well done. I think for the most part, I don't know about the POV like sort of way of shooting it. Like we're seeing it from Mike. For those who haven't seen it, I mean spoilers, but the opening scene is Michael Myers as a kid stabbing his sister to death, and like it's one of the best scenes in the film, I would say. But it also
yeah,
feels like just like the way it's shot, and like when he's like stabbing his sister, but he's like looking at his hand as he's doing it is like okay,
yeah.
that you wouldn't see that, you'd see like him looking at it happening. But I guess that's sort of a cheaper way to do it and make it not seem as obviously
Right.
fake, like because they wouldn't
Yeah.
stab an they so I guess they had to figure out a way like okay, so they're not, so we have to like because
And like the whole thing, like you're just looking through the clown mask, and it's kind of like obstructing
yeah, exactly,
a
yeah.
little bit. Yeah,
And I think like the moment when I think, and then there's the sort of reveal where he walks outside and they pull the mask off his face, and I feel like it's meant to be like this big reveal, like oh my god, what happened, but it's kind of
yeah,
just like, I mean, I didn't really get that because it kind of obviously looks like a kid to me, like the hand reaching out to grab it and everything. Like to me, I'm like, oh, that's a child's hand. Like
yeah.
it doesn't work in the same way for me, which I think that is a part that sort of dates this film. Like, but I do sort of imagine if I had seen this back in when it came out, I might be more shocked because you don't see, because this kind of film just wasn't a thing back then. You had
Yeah.
I mean, even something like Psycho, for example, which has sort of slashery elements, is not really that much of a slasher film though. Like it's,
No,
but uh, that's just sort of the thing.
because back then they had to like censor a lot, like gore a lot more. They couldn't show as much either. They
Yeah,
could probably show
exactly.
like a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, exactly. That's because this film, this film get in Psycho, it's very, and this film isn't even like this original one isn't actually too violent. Like it's people get
No.
stabbed and people get sort of you know, guy, as you mentioned before, gets like pinned to a wall with like a knife through him or whatever.
But it's not as violent as like the next like movies and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
like the
Like next
2018 one, for
movies.
example, is just,
Yeah.
which we'll discuss that soon. But I think the
Or like
opening.
the Rob Zombie one.
I have not seen those, but I
That
imagine they're
terrible, 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 but like really violent.
really, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sort of to get on to so like the opening scene of the first Halloween is my favorite scene in the film. Probably, I think every Halloween film has a establishing scene that establishes Michael Myers with where he just kills someone in a brutal way, which I think is a good way to sort of because it also gets an audience ready. Like, okay, like straight up, there's a kill in the opening 10 minutes. That's good. You know, we need to sort of establish things and then we can go into the story. I think that's a good way of doing it in terms of structurally because you know
Yeah, definitely. It goes straight into it, you know?
mhm.
Which I love horror movies like that just don't like put like lots of like don't get me wrong. For me, it's the suspense that gets me, not the actual like jump scares and all that. But I
Yeah,
love
exactly.
a like a slasher movie that just goes straight into the killing, but like straight into
Hmm.
the slashing, like because it's the shock of like, oh, okay, wow, we're just going straight into it. Okay.
Yeah, like Scream, for example, is another great example of it. It opens with a slasher. It begins with a killing, but it's interesting because that is also sort of expected from these kinds of films. Like, okay, so someone in the first like 10 minutes or whatever is gonna die because that's just the
Yeah,
way as
slashers
people,
work.
yeah, how slashers work, and as people who've seen slashers before and seen horror films before, you expect a kill straight up front. To sort of talk about something performance wise in this film, I don't think like anyone is amazing in this film, but I don't think anyone's really that bad
No.
either. Like it's and you know I know you don't really go to this kind of film for performances, but like there's just not really a whole lot of standout sort of
Yeah, yeah.
performances. I think like Donald Pleasance is really good as Dr. Loomis. I think he's really good in the film, and I think he really portrays the sort of horror of Michael Myers and the he like his genuine fear and terror of Michael. I think helps add to the suspense as well because he seems scared of him, and he's been dealing with this kid for like 15 years or so. So
I will say, Jamie Lee Curtis,
yeah,
for like this is one of her like debut like
yeah.
roles.
I think this might have been her debut. I'll quickly check, but I think it was certainly one of the first. It was the first major thing she definitely did. It made her a name. Let me check. So you were gonna say about something about Jamie Lee Curtis?
I was just saying for one of her more like debut like roles, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like she did do a really good job. You know, she's a young actress,
Mm. Yeah, this was
all
her
that kind of
debut.
stuff. Yeah, and I think it really just cemented her as a actress. You know, especially
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
showed her potential because like although it might have been like a little bit campy occasionally and all that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
she did.
It did.
I feel like out of everyone, she did like the best job out of them all.
I think.
Uh,
Yeah, these kinds of films, sort of these kinds of horror films, I feel like can really elevate, can really make an actor or actress. It really
yeah,
can establish them as a name, and like, even if their perform, like, not to say her performance is bad per se, but even with like a decent performance, that still can do so much for a career because it's a big deal, and people will presumably want to see her in more see some someone in more things if they enjoy a film, and I think this film really, like, she's good in it. Like, she's definitely very much a good performance in the film.
yeah, definitely.
and I think this was a sort of around that time as well. You didn't really have as many sort of female protagonists. I feel like
Yeah.
it's very uh,
Well, in some horror movies of that day, you had you had the typical like final girl lead male
yeah,
actor with the final girl. When
yeah,
this was just solely just the lead female actor,
yeah,
final girl.
hmm
That's it, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah, and I think
Which really
because
changed the horror genre,
yeah,
I think.
because I think in horror now you'll definitely find a lot more. You'll find more female like Nightmare on Elm Street. The lead protagonist of the first film is a female character. And I think this film did sort of change those things, and an Alien, came out the next year.
Yeah.
Sigourney Weaver's the main character in that, and
Yeah.
this film I feel like broke some sort of barriers of like allowing women, like to have female leads in films, and
Yeah. And they weren't just, like the like total like don't she screamed her head off. But she also
yeah,
fought back.
yeah, she wasn't just like waiting
She
for I mean she does get saved by
Yeah, but
Loomis.
she wasn't like that was like after the fact that she started fighting back.
Yeah, and she thought she had killed, after he had been, she'd stabbed him and thought, okay, Michael's dead. It was only like right at the end of the film, And it's again another change. It's not just a female character waiting for a guy to come in and save them or anything. It's a character who's who's being proactive and doing things and actually fighting back
Definitely.
against the villain, which I think it was very much not seen back then, but now it's sort of sort of in modern days you do get more female protagonists in horror films, which I think is a good thing. I think like it really is, and it also sort of I guess can create more like I think like certain audiences. I think seeing a female protagonist can create more worry for them if they're going up against like this big strong male murderer or whatever. I think it can in some aspects make people more invested because like they want to see the woman get free, and they're not as I don't know. I think
Yeah,
it sort of can appeal to certain people because they're seeing a woman standing up, even a comparatively
definitely.
weaker woman, to this stronger, like Michael Myers is basically
Yeah.
invincible,
Yeah.
seeing a female character, standing up against him and
But
fighting
I
back.
feel like it can also sometimes go the other way where it just doesn't work. I like to say also that she was 19 when she did that. Jamie Lee Curtis was 19 years old when she played Laurie,
Really?
which again, she wasn't even 21 yet. Like,
Oh
which
yeah, no,
was
yeah, that's yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
that was like that's a like pretty impressive that like at 19 years age she did a pretty good job.
Yeah, because
Not the best job in the world, don't get me wrong, but a pretty darn good job.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think acting is certain people, because I've touched on this many times before, but child actors, for example, are not the best typically. So like, I think child, and even a lot of people who are teenagers or are cast to play teenagers don't really work that well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think she's pretty solid in the film. I also think Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis is really good. He's the best
Oh
part of
yeah.
the film. Sort of in an overall package, I think he's probably the best part of the film. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
the sort of performance wise, he really as I mentioned before, he sells the fear of Michael Myers, and I think that
Oh,
really
yeah.
helps elevate the film. And then yeah, they're the only two real standout performances. You've got Michael Myers, but it's not really acting the guy's doing. It's more just sort of
Breathing.
breathing and sort of just moving around and stabbing people and throwing people and all that, which isn't, and plus it's got a mask on, so you don't have to do anything with the face and doesn't have to speak
I
any
will
lines or
say
anything.
I did like the actor, the stunt double or actor or whatever, who played Myers, was really good at like building that suspense off because like surprise enough, it's pretty hard to just stand still in one spot for take after take after take after take. Like that's
Yeah.
it's you might like a lot of people might be like, oh, you're just standing still, for like, and it's like, but it's like multiple takes,
Yeah, and
and you're
it's
just doing the
being
same
able
thing over
to,
again.
yeah, also the ability to create any
That
form of
menacing
suspense,
presence.
yeah, any form of
Yeah,
suspense due to, like, because I think it's beyond, there's this performance, of just of sort of the even the subtle things, like the heavy breathing and everything, and just the way
yeah,
he moves. But it's also score and editing and all that, and all those sort of things which do help.
yeah,
But you also need a decent performance at the beginning, just like on the raw footage, to work with before you can't just sort of create a suspenseful. You can't create suspense from nothing. You need to have at least something decent to start with before you can you know
yeah, definitely.
yeah. I think, yeah, Michael Myers is far more. Again, the character though isn't really, he's given a little bit of explanation, sort of, he's the opening of the film, we see him killing his
Yeah,
sister, but we don't really get a whole lot from him otherwise. Like, there's a handful of moments of like sort of exposition dialogue from Loomis, which are a bit like whatever. Like, again, it's because like the because of the film being released, then you don't see that kind of thing. So I understand why it's there. It just feels nowadays a bit more like, okay, it's just like an exposition dump basically.
yeah, definitely.
But considering this was sort of an older film, you can sort of excuse it a bit
Oh,
more. But it
no way. Sorry, I just looked up
what
something. So the original actor for Michael Myers is Moran, right?
right?
He actually plays Michael in Halloween Kills as well.
Ah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, you don't, because again, you don't see the
Like,
face of the ages, does, and plus the film takes place 40 years later. So,
yeah,
ah,
but like you gotta consider like how old he is at this point, and he's still doing stuff like that because that's a still a somewhat physical role.
yeah. I mean, because at certain points, it definitely feels like, okay, you need a stunt double in to do this, but it's also like there's still quite a bit that they have, like, that you don't,
Mm.
like there's even just regular kills that don't require a lot of stunt work. It's like it's still like, okay, you still need, it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
fair play to.
65 years old,
Oh,
and he's still
Jesus
yeah.
Christ, fair play to him. He really, yeah. And I get, like, it's, it's, I wouldn't say it's an amazing performance, but it's like the fact that it's able even remotely tense is a pretty decent feat. Like, to create, yeah, even some form of tension just
Yeah.
by like, yeah, just sort of the simple things of just sort of standing there. And like there's that scene sort of towards the end of the film where he's underneath the blanket or whatever, which in sort of concept seems comical almost, which is also, I feel like the point is like that she doesn't realize that, because she thinks it's a boyfriend or whatever playing
Yeah.
a joke or whatever. But even that, because as an audience, we're like, oh, it's Michael under that mask. He's gonna,
Well,
well,
Michael,
she, yeah,
I feel like the character himself kind of likes, playing with his food. Like,
mm, yeah,
his whole thing is that he stalks them and
yeah,
kind of like messes with them
yeah,
slightly,
psychologically, yeah, fucks with them. Yeah, like
and
when
then
Laurie's in
goes for
class
the
and she
kill.
looks out, and yeah, when Laurie, looks out the window, and then boom, he's outside the door, and then outside the window, and then she
And then it does the classic truck pass or bus pass or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's gone.
Yeah, exact. Oh yeah, a car truck. That's a staple of
Horror
horrors.
movies.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
got sort of something sort of creepy or whatever, and then a truck goes past, and then it's gone. It's like whoa,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, like when he's hiding behind he's standing ahead at like the hedge, and then her friend walks over, and then her friend walks over to the hedge, and she's gone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One bit in the film that I quite liked actually is, I don't remember at what point it is, but there's a scene where he's sort of waiting outside the Myers house, and then there's those three arsehole kids who are just pissing about, and he scares them off, and then the police like chief or whatever like grabs him on the shoulder, and then he just like jumps, and like that's because that, nowadays would be like prime opportunity for a jump scare, just have like a loud
Oh, definitely.
like
But I
spike
feel
in
like
the
it
score.
really shows how much he's like afraid
Mhm.
of Myers being out on the loose, like
Yeah,
how much he fears him.
yeah, because even just like a guy slightly grabbing his shoulders just like makes him jump, and I think it's very underplayed in terms of like the music. Like there's no real loud just like burst of score to sort of make someone think like, oh, that was meant to be scary. It's just like it's like silence, and he just jumps when and his shoulder is touched, and that's all you need.
Yeah,
They don't. Yeah, there's
no
no
loud noise, no
overplaying.
nothing, just a jump.
Yeah, and horror has that problem where there are jump scares, but it's like it's I hate those things where you think where like a character like gets grabbed, or someone pretends to be like getting hurt or whatever, and then they like jump at someone, and that's meant to be like the scare, because it's like that's not scary, that's
Yeah.
just creating false tension. And when stuff actually does happen, you're like, oh, okay, you're not really as bothered, because all the
Oh, I gotta say, like modern horror movies, I most of the time I can predict when a jump scare is gonna happen. Like
oh
it's
yeah.
really that's so predictable at the moment that you just like, oh, jump scare is gonna come right now.
I,
That's what I like about Halloween. It's not too many jump scares. It's
mhm.
mostly just suspense building, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I love for horror movies is when they build up that suspense. Because
hmm
for me, it's not the actual jump scares that get me. It's the suspense, the build up to it. Like I know it's gonna come, but I don't know when it's gonna come, and it's
yeah,
it's like that build up is really just I think really helps cement it as a classic.
yeah. I think, yeah, one of the things about it that works for me, I think, is that it really like the scary, like there's the occasional sort of sting in the score, like when Michael like walks past a window or anything, or like
Yeah,
one of those bits where like there's a female character, and she's like on the phone, and she's walking past like this glass door, and certain and sort of one past Michael's there, she walks away, and then she walks back, and he's gone. It's like that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I don't really have a major problem with that. It to me, like, I think it's sort of I think it's better when it's underplayed, and the horror just comes from like, oh, he just like walks, he just like is at like in the corner of the frame, he just walks past, and like you don't see him that much. I think that works better because
Yeah, I love that kind of trope. Like you don't actually like see him like I love the kind of tropes that where like you don't actually see the killer like openly, like really like obviously you just like see hints of them like in maybe the background where you have to really search and be like, oh my god, they're right there. But
yeah, you see like a shadow as they like walk past a house or whatever.
or,
It's like
or, or like it might be like a like I can't. I remember seeing. I don't remember what horror movie, but I remember one horror. I do remember a scene from a horror movie that like the killer was in a group of like a whole like group of people, like a crowd,
Mm-hmm.
and they was like way off in the background while they were focusing on the main characters. And
Yeah.
so like you really had to like zoom in and look at it. And it was like, oh wow, they're right there stalking them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I love that kind of subtle like
Yeah.
horror as well.
Yeah. I think I'm far more interested in horror that plays more with subtlety and doesn't overplay things, and just sort
Yeah,
of, yeah,
overplays it. Yeah,
yeah. We're sort of talking about this film, and we sort of to sort of, because the thing about this film is there's lots of sort of overall things we could talk about, but there aren't like a lot of really great scenes. Like there's the opening scene which we touched on, which I think is a really good scene, and I do like sort of towards the end where it's just Michael killing. I think sort of all the build up to that is fine and everything, and I understand why it's there and it's necessary to create the tension, but I'm not as interested in it, beyond the sort of odd moment where you see Michael, walking in the background of a shot or something. I think that's good. But just a lot
yeah,
of the characters I'm not particularly interested in, and but then as we get to the final scene of the film, and you know yeah, there's Michael and he's attacking Laurie, and they're fighting back. She is thrown down a set of stairs or whatever, which is shot very strangely, because they couldn't actually do it for real, so they had to sort of like do it as best they could with like the editing, but just have it's edited strangely. But this is an older film; you sort of have to give it the be more sort of open to it. But yeah, and then she rips his mask off, and he's like, what the fuck, why'd you do it, and he sort of freaks out about it. And there's I do really like the bit where she's just sort of like sitting there like thinking like, okay, it's done, I've killed Michael, and then in the background he just like sits up and it's like, oh shit. Like, fuck, man, he's not dead. Like, I think that's a really nice bit. And then he's shot out the balcony, and he falls, and Loomis runs out, and he's gone. It's like, oh no,
yeah,
what's
exactly.
gonna
Like,
happen? Yeah. And
I really like the fact that like when he doesn't have his mask on, he just freaks out and just goes like, "Oh, I don't have my mask," you know?
yeah, like the mask is a part of him, and he needs it to like live. Like
Yeah, it's like for me, I feel like he that mask is like a personality itself. Like when he puts that mask on, he's a different person than who he is. So
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like applied that like for instance the scene when he's a kid and he's got the clown mask. He's
Yeah,
wearing whenever he's wearing a mask, he's that killer. The shape.
yeah,
He's the shape.
yeah.
But as soon as
Yeah,
yeah, and as soon as you get the scene when the mask is off, he's like all of a sudden just freaks out because he's no longer the shape when he has the mask on. I feel like.
yeah. The mask is it makes him who he is. It's a part of his identity,
Yeah,
and without it, he doesn't see himself as like that much. He's like, oh, this is the mask sort of is his identity and his personality basically, which I think I think is works. I think it's really nice to sort of I think it works and create sort of a mystery behind him as a character, because and again, the mask is so iconic. It's like Freddy Krueger's sweater, or Jason's mask, that kind of thing. But I feel like the sweater and the mask for Freddy and Jason respectively don't really have that much significance, and don't really have a whole lot to like. They're iconic, but it doesn't feel like they have much to do with the identity and the personality of those characters that much. Whereas Michael Myers' mask is basically who he is, and it helps give him sort of this certain
yeah, definitely
feel.
like
Yeah.
I feel the same way about it. Like it's what makes him him. You know.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and I like that the final few shots of the film are just of the houses, various buildings that we've seen throughout the film, while there's sort of the credits starting and there's just the score. I think that's really a nice way to end it, and it sort of leaves an audience member like, what's going to happen because Michael's disappeared and everything. I think it's yeah, I like this film.
It's a classic horror movie, and I don't think horror would be the same without it.
Yeah. So, did you want to put a rating on it out of 10?
I'll give it a solid 7 or 8 out of 10. You know, it's very just for it's a classic. It's very like it influenced so much of modern day horror, and without it, it wouldn't. Without it again, horror wouldn't be the same. I don't think, or slasher movies.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me personally, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. It's a weak 8. I don't think the film's very dated and it's got certain elements that don't really work. I don't really like all the characters that much. Like, I mean, I like Laurie and Loomis and Michael Myers is interesting, but besides that, I'm not that especially bothered about any of the characters. And yeah, it is a dated film, which doesn't help and does sort of hold it back a bit, but
Yeah.
yes, an 8 out of 10 from me. I do rather enjoy the film, though, for the most part. So yeah, then the 2018 Halloween film, which is very divisive from what I've gathered. People either really enjoy the film or they really don't like it.
I loved it. I feel like it gave a new twist to the franchise, but also like it definitely brought the franchise back from the dead, back to its original roots. Like I remember watching it for the first time, and then all of a sudden hearing that iconic score, and then it just brings back that suspenseful horror of the classic movie, the original movie, and I think it brings back the same vision of the original movie, just in a modern time where you can get away with a lot more, you know.
I think I prefer the original film personally, but I do like this film well enough. I think a lot of the complaints that I have seen about this film are sort of weak, and I don't really get. I know sort of one thing people complain about was the comedy and how there's too many jokes and that doesn't really work, and it's just kind of like, is there that much comedy? It's
I don't know. I don't think there is. There's a lot of killing and gore. It's a lot more violent.
Yeah, I think it has more comedy than the original film, but it's not that much comedy. I think it's used. It's not really used at an inappropriate time. It's not used to. It doesn't really undercut a serious moment.
And you kind of need. Yeah, and you kind of need that comedy to lighten up the movie a little bit. It can't be if it's you kind of need that little bit of comedy aspect, else it's just going to be just a whole bunch of just killings and stuff like that, you know.
And I mean, I don't really mind the comedy in this one. I think it's fine. It doesn't really affect my feeling on the film that much. I think it works for the most part. I think some of the jokes are a bit weak, but that's more just it's not the fact that there's comedy in it that is the problem. It's just the way it's executed that I have a problem with personally. At some points.
Yeah, but I will say, I love Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, 2018 Halloween, more than I like her in original. I really love how she made that character into just a badass character, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if this has come up on this show before, but I'm a big fan of bringing back bringing back characters, but as older people. sort of like Wolverine
Characters
and
who
Logan,
survived,
for example.
you know?
Like
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
that kind of thing of like, or like to sort of give it another example, like Han Solo in the new Star Wars films, sort of that kind of thing of like, here's this character who or like Ash in the Evil Dead films, bringing him back as an older man, like that kind of thing. I'm a fan of seeing those kinds of characters, and bringing them
like,
back.
They've learnt from their experiences and now like kick ass,
Yeah, and how a lot of them are very how changed they are, and how sort of crap things have become for them. Because as we see with Laurie in this film, her daughter was taken from her, by child services and everything.
Because she obsessed over Miles himself,
Michael Myers,
constantly.
yeah. And I think it really is quite. I think Jamie Lee Curtis is better in this film, personally. I think I think she's given more to do in this film, which I think helps. She's not just sort of like, sort of screaming and everything and sort of running away from this. Or, she's like, has to sort of internalize the sort of things she's done and how she sort of screwed up her daughter and everything, that kind of, and, how her granddaughter, how her daughter doesn't want her to meet her granddaughter and that whole thing. Yeah, I think that's
But
really...
it also shows that she has, like, a little bit of PTSD from that original encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
how it's affected her psychology, like, psychologically, sorry, that's the word.
How psychologically damaged she is after that event, because, any reasonable person would sort of kind of lose it after that, because it's like, oh, this, this is I went through this horrible experience and now it's changed me forever, and, you can't really do much about it, but it still is affecting the people around her, and she lost her daughter because of it, and she doesn't have that greater relationship with her daughter anymore, it's just like and it's interesting, and it's that kind of dynamic really works. I really like sort of examining those kinds of dynamics of like a character and seeing like how their past has changed them and how it's at time and how it sort of screwed up their sort of present day lives as well. I think that it's really good. I think sort of performance wise, this film is stronger than the original. I think
definitely.
I think the characters are far more interesting in this one, and
I gotta say, Laurie in this movie gives me the same like vibes as Ripley in Aliens, the sequel.
Sequel to Alien.
Like that same vibe of the get away from her, you bitch. Same.
The older sort of older woman who's sort of looking after her daughter or whatever, but being like a badass. No, I know what you mean. It does sort of have those vibes, and I think it works. I think, Jamie Lee Curtis really portrays that well, and it works for this film. I think that this the film. I do think the original film is better, but I do quite like this film, and I think that it has. To be fair, this film does have a couple more scenes that I like. Like, it's got better scenes. Like, it's got sort of individual scenes that are probably better than anything in the original film. I just think something about the original has a sort of air about it where I'm like, I like this more.
I will say,
I like them equally, maybe even.
Yeah, definitely. And like, for instance, like my favorite scene of that movie is the whole like end fight. Spoilers ahead.
Oh,
but,
in the house.
The whole end fight in the house, and how showing like how prepared she was for this, like like floodlights. She rigged up her house to just engulf him in flames, and how virtually the whole plan was to trap him in the basement
Yeah.
and then just set the house on fire. Which I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's just cool, you know? She just uses herself to lure him to the basement to trap
Yeah.
him, and it's just like, like it shows how much she just thought about this, and it's like that whole
Yeah.
end fight scene is probably like the best part of the movie.
Yeah. But it also does, sort of illustrate the whole, like, she's really obsessed over this. There's sort of an air of tragedy to the whole, like, she has just been thinking about this and obsessing
And she
over it
hasn't lived her life,
and
you know?
planning it for, however long, which, is nice because it's come in handy now, but it's also like, her life isn't, she couldn't really grow up as sort of a normal adult. She had to, and she just sort of had to try it, she just changed, and I think, but I like the whole, sort of, and the whole thing where it's like they trap him under the stairs with the spikes, that go across, like, I think that's really good as well. And I think the film, I think that's really nice just to see how prepared she is,
And definitely like the best sequel, like hands down. I that's definitely the true sequel. Like like it, like if you know, I'm assuming you might not know a little bit about the lore of the sequel Halloween movies that came after the original one.
I saw the Halloween 2, like the original sort of Halloween 2, but I haven't seen.
It's really stupid.
Yeah, I haven't seen. Isn't it a thing? I might be misremembering.
Laurie's supposed to be the long lost sister of
Michael
Myers.
Yeah, that's
and the whole thing is like he knows he's related to her, and that's why he must kill her, because he must kill all his family.
Oh, that's so.
And then
dumb.
it goes into the fact that he's the personification of evil itself, you know.
I mean,
look, I don't mind that. That's kind of cool, and like they still kind of use that. They still use that in
I'm all for him being like he's just as pure evil. There's no reasoning or anything with him. He just is evil. He will kill. I'm fine with that. Like that doesn't really bother me too much. But
they start going to like cults and stuff like that. You know, they're going into the cult territory.
Oh, and I know. He just keeps that. Because he dies at the end of the original Halloween 2, and then they don't bring him back for the third one. I haven't seen it, but I know the third one is like its sort of own thing.
Yeah, and then I think they resurrect him, and then it just gets dumb.
I am interested in watching the other Halloween films, and I will at some point, but like they just sound awful for the most part.
Yeah. First for the third one follows a company that is a part of the evil cult, and they make masks that explode people's heads when a certain thing plays.
Wow, that sounds so bad.
Because they need a certain amount of kills to, I think, resurrect Michael Myers or something like that. It's just dumb. Mm-hmm. So that's why I like this movie. That's why I like this movie so much, and it's definitely the true sequel, because it really just grounds it back to to the original. It made me like reminisce of the original. Like I was like watching it when I watched it for the first time. I was getting giddy, because as soon as like I heard the classic theme and I saw Michael in the mask and he starts killing, and I'm like, oh my God, this just, it gave me goosebumps. And, it just, but it's like, it's also like its own standalone movie as well. Like, it's not, it brings its own element to it that I think improves on the series in general.
Yeah, like it's yeah. This is like a sequel, but it definitely isn't just doing what the original did. It's more, it's still horror. It's still sort of in that area, but it's also doing more to it. Like the kills are far more gruesome in this film.
Oh.
Holy shit! Like
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it was like either like practical CGI or like a mixture of both.
I imagine it was probably
Like, I'm fairly sure like Carpendale. What's that one directed by Carpendale as well? Halloween
the
2018?
2018 one. No, it was directed by David Gordon Green, I think is his name.
Because I know Carpendale like really loved his practical effects.
Yeah. I mean,
I
The
love
Thing is a
any horror
prime
movie that
example of like
any
like The Thing is just an example of like purely amazing practical effects. Like so, like it just looks like just the designs of the creature.
That's why
and
it's
the
my
thing.
favorite. Because it's just the pinnacle of horror movie practical effects, and I love horror movies that use good practical effects, which is very difficult to do because if it's not of a certain quality, you can just instantly tell like that's fake, that's crap. And like, it's like I think it uses a mixture of both practical and CGI.
Yeah, there's some of the kills in this film that's like, yeah, you couldn't really do that. I mean, you could try doing it practically, but it definitely wouldn't. I think it's a lot of it's probably there's a lot of practical stuff that's enhanced by CGI elements. I feel like is probably what it would be, because that sort of is what a lot of people do with films now. They sort of keep everything. They do practical a lot of the time. Just add a bit of CGI to make things look better.
Like I know, like it's a common thing to add like CGI blood instead of like they add like a little bit of real like fake blood, but they mostly use like CGI blood to make it like more pretty much,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To sort of go to that, I think like the kill, because in the original film the kills are pretty muted. They're just like stabbings, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that much. But in this film, like there's the guy who he tries to kiss Laurie's granddaughter, which is very uncomfortable and very weird. And then he's trying to run away from Michael, but he gets like his cape caught, and then he like is stabbed and he falls, and his like the spike on the top of the gate just goes through his mouth.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, that was just messed up.
I'm just like, oh, that's just fucking gory, but like,
for my one, it was a whole gas station bathroom.
Oh Jesus Christ, that is at a point uncomfortable to watch. Like when he's just grabbing the guy's head and just fucking bashing it on the wall.
Yeah, and the thing is that like it's something like we've all been to like a petrol station bathroom, right?
Yeah, they're awful places. Just public bathrooms in general.
Places. Yeah, and so it's like, well, no, the really dodgy ones are not like but like the dodgy ones, you've had to go to the dodgy ones occasionally, and it's like really like just like hits home, like because you don't know who's going to come in.
This sort of that scene is really uncomfortable to watch. And when Michael is like dropping the teeth down into the cubicle, and she's like, what the fuck? And she's like, and then she realizes his teeth, and she's like, holy shit, like that. And then like
he doesn't just like he absolutely like massacres the guy, and then just goes straight after the the lady as well.
Yeah, and just beats it. And it's so much more visceral and gruesome for him to just bash stuff, because a stab, like, that's not good, but it's like it's pretty quick, like it's but just grabbing someone and just bashing their head against a brick wall or like a stone wall or whatever, it's like, oh god.
And like for a bit you think the lady, like the woman's gonna survive, like you think, oh, she might
and then
get away,
doesn't.
But no, I'm like, no. I immediately, as soon as he walked in, I was like, she's not going to survive at all.
Yeah,
But
just
that
like
teeth scene was like, oh,
yeah.
nasty.
And I kind of like the way Michael's set up. Like if he's in a room with you, you're dead. Like there's no, you cannot survive. You like except
That's
for
your
that,
Laurie Strode.
except for Lois Strode, yeah. And that kid,
Plot armor.
the little black kid, towards the sort of
Yeah,
latter half
but
of the
also
film.
like you can't really kill kids. And well, no,
You
I
can.
I love horror movies that do like aren't shy of killing kids.
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
it's a very taboo thing because a lot of people like don't want to see kids die, and it's like a very like like it can really affect somebody psychologically, seeing especially if they've experienced something like that.
Yeah,
But
no.
it's such a taboo thing. Like it's but I really love horror movies that aren't afraid of doing that
Yeah.
because it's like it really cements like no one's safe. Really,
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a problem if a film kills a kid, because I just have, like, I don't
as long as
need.
it's not like overly gruesome or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
Like,
don't. Yeah, don't make it exploitative or anything. I'm all like, if a kid dies in the film, I don't mind, but it is just sort of like, it doesn't bother me in a way that I know it bothers certain people, and I feel like
Jaws killed kids.
yeah, there's a pretty not like there's like relatively
Famous
well
scene.
relatively
Yeah.
well known scene where you just see a shark in the background spinning and there's just blood just spurting out of
Yeah,
the water.
it just yanks a kid pretty much.
Yeah, and I think like I'm not and people people love Jaws, and I think Jaws honestly is quite gruesome for like a film that's like
For the time period.
at
Yeah.
a time at the time, I don't know if it's been changed since, but Jaws was originally rated a PG like when it came out. Like it was really like just people with times were different.
Yeah. But I just really think this movie was a good extension to the franchise, really
Yeah.
expanded upon the story.
Yeah, we sort of looked at. I really like the open, because I feel like we're getting close to wrapping up our discussion in this film as well.
Yeah.
I really like the opening scene where it's the two reporters who we see get brutally killed later in the like asylum or wherever, where Michael's
It's
being
like an
held
asylum for the criminal insane.
criminally insane. Yeah, and I really like that bit where they walk out into this like giant yard and there's all these other sort of people who are
And
all different, and they're all just sort of like
There are yards like that.
yeah, just
Which is
so they
cool
can
to
get
see.
some, they just get sun and they can walk within this square. And the bit where the guy, he pulls out the mask and he shows it to Michael, and then all the other
And
people just
start
start going,
freaking
freaking out,
out.
and he just keeps like yelling at like Michael. He's trying to communicate with Michael, and he's just yelling at him.
he's just silent. Yeah.
And just like sort of the build up of the score, and then just as it like sort of reaches its peak, it goes straight to the titles, and then the iconic theme plays. And I think that's like a brilliant way of opening the film, like a really effective scene. And there's no people being killed. There's no sort of anything violent. It's just the build up and the tension and the score and performances as well. Like it all really just works.
It kind of like I kind of think like it kind of like contrasts the original movie, because the original movie opened up with a kill from Michael.
Yeah, Michael. Yeah, he's killing him.
And then like the first movie ends up, and then this movie ends up opening on Michael again.
But it's
But
40
he
years
hasn't
later.
killed anyone, and he's he's captured.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
and he's like, plus he's like in his 50s to 60s, depending. Like,
Yeah.
well, he's like 6 years old when he kills his sister, and and then the film takes place 15 years later. So he would be about 50, nearly 60 or so, give or take. Yeah, no, I think that's a really, and again, it's a good establishing scene, because it's like, okay, he's the mask still means something. It still represents something.
Yeah. And like you got to think like, how does he stay that strong?
Yeah, that's
It's like, is he like doing like push-ups and like bloody like one arm like chin-ups or something like that in his like padded cell or something like that?
It's this film this franchise, you really have to suspend your disbelief a bit, because Michael just goes through a lot and still survives. Like, there's really
I think that's the whole like, it's because he's like he's evil itself, and that's how he survives. He's not actually like
he's human, but only like he's sort of human. He looks human, but there's sort of more going on with him.
Yeah.
On the inside, that it sort of explains why he can't die. Basically, like he just goes through so much in the film, and he's just like,
like he survives a burning building. Being trapped in a burning building.
He's trapped in a burning building, and he just he lives.
And multiple gunshots and stab wounds from Laurie and her family.
Yeah, and even stuff like shotgun blood, sort of point blank. Like he loses a couple fingers, and he just plays it off. He just goes back to trying to kill them again.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's like also because he's like hyper focused on killing the person.
Yeah,
and he just ignores it.
Did you have any sort of final things you wanted to, any sort of final scenes or moments you wanted to talk about in this film before we give us?
No, not really. I just think it's a good film. Good sequel.
Yeah. So a rating for that one?
I will give it a 7. I'll put it just underneath the original.
Okay, yeah.
Because, like, for me, I'm very much like, sometimes you just can't beat the original.
Yeah.
It's a very close 7. Yeah, very close 7 to tying.
Yeah.
But I think it's just not there yet.
Yeah. For me, again, it's an 8 out of 10 like the original. I do... It's closer to it's on the precipice of becoming a 7, I feel like. I think, like, the original is better, personally. But they are kind of on the same level. I just think the original just has a bit more that I like. And
definitely.
I mean, Donald Pleasance being in the original definitely helps. I think he really works in the
this
film.
Yeah, this is practically... The first movie is Alien, and this movie is Aliens, practically. Because it's got, like... it follows the whole, like...
It's still...
first
got horror bits, but it's also got a lot more action.
More action.
Yeah.
When the first movie was more suspenseful horror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Halloween 2018, and then Halloween Kills, which you haven't seen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna limit my talk. I won't talk about it for too long. Then I'll just sort of give my general thoughts. It's definitely weaker than the original and the 2018 film. I think it got a lot of undue hate. I don't really know what people disliked about it personally. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid follow-up, and I do like what it's sort of setting up for Halloween Ends, which is the next one that's coming out, and I don't know if it will be the final one, because I feel like there's too much money to make in this franchise, but...
Yeah, but that's kind of happens with the last movies, like the original trilogy movies, is that... Oh, not trilogy, like... Quadrilogy or something like that, like Octrilogy. I don't know, Pentatrilogy, Pentilogy. I don't know.
There's too many films.
Yeah, that they kept on making the movies to the point when it just got to like direct to TV, pretty much movies. Mm-hmm. Because the more movies you make, the less, especially you start losing that that feeling of the original, but also like you have to keep on coming with new things to use that, and it just goes downhill.
It needs to keep finding ways to stay relevant. Yeah, and it's like it's a problem with a lot of again with other slasher horror franchises. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street had sort of a similar problem. They made 10 films.
But I gotta say,
and
that the sequel to the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels,
yeah,
a lot of the later ones, I find they're so bad they're funny.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, some of them are so bad that's funny.
Yeah, and then same with Friday the 13th, which went on for so many films.
Jason X.
Jason Goes to Space,
that one is funny.
Yeah. But Halloween Kills, I think I do hope they end the franchise with Halloween Ends. I think if they kept going, it would just be okay, we're just...
With a title like that, they can't not end it there, because it's legitimately called Halloween Ends.
Yeah, but there's always the worry that, they could change that in a few... But I think, if Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't want to do them anymore, they probably have to finish them, because she is the star of these films, and you can't really do one without her.
Definitely.
I'd give Halloween Kills a 7 out of 10. I do like it, and I do think Halloween Ends, hopefully, will have a nice... will be, a conclusion to it all, and hopefully... for my my final episode for the year is a review of the year episode, and hopefully I can get we can do I could record a little thing with you if you are able to see Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, and I can put that in the final.
I'll probably go see it.
Yeah. So I think that's all. Is there any sort of final things you want to say before I wrap this?
I'm waiting for Jason vs. Freddy versus Michael Myers. I'm waiting for that. But we got Jason versus Freddy, and I want a 3-way battle in between all of them. That would be sick.
The question is, of course, who would win? Is the question.
Freddy. He becomes a dream demon. I'm sorry, but
that is no true. Yeah, they can't. You can't really get to Freddy unless.
No, but then again, Michael is apparently supposed to be supernatural himself. Again, he's supposed to be evil incarnated. So I don't know. Yeah, Jason's just a zombie.
Yeah, which a very strong zombie, but a zombie. Yeah, you could eventually deal with. Yeah, Jason. Yeah. I mean, there's got to be people who've been... I have to imagine people have been wanting them to do that kind of film for years at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, besides that, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this week's episode. I didn't want to do all the Halloween films because there's too many of them, and also most of them are crap. Also, I've heard. So I will watch them in my own time, possibly. Maybe not. I don't know.
The Rob Zombie one is really gory.
Mm-hmm.
The story's crap, and it's a bit messed up too. It gets really messed up in some spots, but it's a very unique take. Let's just say. Yeah. And it goes. Yeah. Let's just say I'm not going to spoil it though.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Aaron has been on a few episodes at this point, and possibly one more before the end of the year. If possibly, yes. Maybe a little tie-in episode at the end of the year. Ooh.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you mentioned there was an episode there was a film you wanted to talk about, and I said, I'm gonna do an episode on it towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Listen to all the previous ones. I'm getting close to episode 100, which should be crazy because this is episode... I don't know when this is coming out. This is episode 90 something or other. It's 94, 95 maybe. I don't know. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Goodbye.